Great.
You didn't get the memo, Asha. We specifically excluded you.
All right. Welcome to our Land Use Committee meeting of Monday, May 21st, 2018. I'm Katie Tang, chair of this committee. To my right is Vice Chair Supervisor Jane Kim. To my left is Supervisor Asha Safai, and we are also joined by Supervisor Aaron Peskin. Our clerk is Erica Major, and from SFGov TV, we'd like to thank Michael Baltazar and Nona Melkonian. Madam Clerk, are there any announcements before us?
Yes, please make sure to silence all cell phones and electronic devices. Completed speaker cards and copies of any documents to be included as part of the file should be submitted to the clerk. Items acted upon today will appear on the May 29th Board of Supervisors agenda unless otherwise stated.
Thank you very much. So today we only have one item, so if we could please call item 1.
Item number 1 is an ordinance amending the planning code to increase the transportation sustainability fee by $5 for non-residential projects larger than 99,999 gross square feet, except in the central south of Market area plan.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to the sponsor, Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam Chair and colleagues, and thank you again to the Chair for scheduling this item, as well as hearing it a couple of weeks ago after the unfortunate scheduling snafu at Planning, which was finally heard by the Planning Commission, despite the fact that their 90 days to hear it had lapsed, and you are all in receipt of a letter dated Friday, May 18th, which indicates the unanimous recommendation for this legislation by the Planning Commission. As a matter of fact, if you watch the Planning Commission hearing, commissioners representing a range of perspectives on the Commission actually pushed back on the discussion around whether or not the $2 fee in the Central SOMA should actually be higher, but we're overall in agreement that $2 within the proposed Central SOMA plan was actually probably still too low, but recommended the TSF legislation that is before you today. The new projections put out by the Planning Department based on what is pending in the pipeline show that we have made a significant compromise in our desire to accommodate concerns raised by planning staff, even though their own feasibility study actually determined that a $5 increase to the non-residential transit sustainability fee was not only feasible, but actually a drop in the bucket compared with the overall need shown in the Nexus study. We've taken the projected revenue down from $23 million to roughly $12 million with this compromise, but we also know that these numbers don't really give us an accurate prediction of the future, which is, of course, volatile. What's before us is a policy decision that, frankly, I think we should have made some time ago before, for instance, the Salesforce Tower went up and before the office boom that continues to be at a fever pitch throughout the city. Today, colleagues, we have the opportunity to really plan for the future and not make that same mistake again. We have the opportunity to create a transportation fee baseline now that can be reevaluated later and from time to time. And I think we should redo the feasibility study from 2015 because I think we'll find that there are actually other tiers that can be explored in this current hot market, and that the vacancy and rental assumptions made by planning some 3 years ago are out of date. But most importantly, I think the lack of public outcry on this matter reinforces what the Planning Commission clearly knows and said last Thursday, that these projects are absolutely feasible, that we should be increasing our lowest impact fees for such an important public asset, and that increased transportation infrastructure actually benefits these large commercial projects. And again, we heard this 2 weeks ago. We've got a lot of public support. We did not hear any words of opposition, nor did the Planning Commission in a publicly noticed meeting last Thursday. And with that, colleagues, I commend this piece of legislation to you, and I'd like to thank all of the supporters that we heard from at the last meeting and hope that we can send this to the full board with recommendation.
All right. Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. And colleagues, do we have any other further comments, questions? Okay. Okay. All right. And do any of the department staff want to say anything?
Supervisor Diego Sanchez with the San Francisco Planning Department. I just want to reiterate that on May 17th, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to support the proposed increase to the TSF, $2 in Central Soma Plan area and $5 elsewhere. That concludes the presentation. I'm here for questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. Okay. At this time, I'll open it up to public comment then for item number 1.
My demonstration is not only going to give information pertaining to the topic, but also the 30-day rule where agenda is going to take place pertaining to business and tax regulations of the planning code for South and Market. In order for that tax code to be put into effect, I also want to highlight that this information here must be taken under consideration. For the year 2017, there's a total of $873,923,572 of uncollected taxes from Twitter and 9 other high-tech companies. This came out in 2017. The year before that, there was a total of $1,357,216,777 of uncollected taxes. That's a total of $2,140,349 of uncollected taxes. That's proof how the high-tech companies are getting preferential treatment, and it's putting a bind on all the departments and the people that's most economically disadvantaged and vulnerable and got a combination of both mental and physical disabilities, and our veterans and our homeless people. You're wasting money on navigation centers and these shelters, when the truth of the matter is this money should be spent on low-income and very low-income families to stop the homeless problem. Safai asked, how can you finance the homeless problem? To Kaczynski, I showed him a minimum of $217 billion have been wasted and not collected money from Twitter and 5 other high-tech companies. Now it's 9 high-tech companies that's taking advantage of these preferential tax breaks that you're giving. These multi-billion-dollar companies don't need a break. The people that's most vulnerable and economically disadvantaged and homeless on the street need a break.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Jeremy Pollack here, speaking on my own behalf on my lunch break. Thank you very much for considering this, and I'd like to echo Supervisor Peskin's comments. And I think, in general, I urge you to support this, at least as it's proposed here. I think it seems clear to me that the Central Soma plan could stomach that hopeful $5 increase as well. And I really commend the planning staff on their work on the fiscal feasibility analysis. I think that's really helpful to have those numbers broken down, but I think that analysis is only as accurate as the data and the assumptions that go into it. And I think seeing that that analysis based on a $74 per square foot price, when we just saw reports about Facebook leasing Park Tower and reports that that's at over $100 per square foot, is such a dramatic increase. I think it just shows what incredible demand and profitability there is in these large office towers, and we know how much transportation and housing impacts those have. And I think we need to do a better job of capturing that value. And I think it's just that uncertainty in the costs and the assumptions in these analysis is really what drives a lot of the problems we have in coming to an agreement on issues like this fee and the inclusionary housing fee. And I urge you to find some way to try to get a little more certainty and transparency in those numbers. And I think some way to look at the pro formas of these development projects to get a real idea of what the numbers are would go a long way to sort of building trust in these debates we have. And definitely, I think projects that receive public subsidies, you should look at a way to look at the pro formas of those to make sure we're all on the same page in debating the fees that they pay. But I urge you to support this as it's written and reconsider this fee along with the jobs housing linkage fee based on the profitability of office space in the current economic climate. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Howard Stressner for the Sierra Club. So we wrote you a letter supporting this fee increase, and it's very good. And I would repeat Supervisor Peskin's words that it's really just a drop in the bucket. Much more is necessary. But I would like to take my Sierra Club hat off for a moment and think about feasibility. What I would see when you have these fees, what you're doing is reducing the price of the land under any of these projects. And Lord knows that landowners, including myself, have had great windfall of the last 40 years in the price of land under their buildings or vacant land. So when you increase these fees, it's not a really big deal. As long as the developer has notice and the owner has notice, you should have to do them in advance, give everybody notice that it's going to happen so they negotiate the price of the land, knowing that these fees are going to be in place. And then these fees can be much higher, and we can take care of transit and do a better job, because none of these projects are really very feasible without very good transit. They need the transit as much as all of the people who ride it do. So you're doing the right thing in a little way. Do more. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public who wish to comment on item 1? Please come on up.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. I'm Sharon Lai with One Vassar. We are one of the key development sites in Central Soma. Just wanted to comment to say that we appreciate the board's consideration and as well as the planning department's analysis on this. We certainly agree that transportation infrastructure and investment in the neighborhood is certainly very important, which is exactly why the planning process over 16 separate planning commission hearings have created a very comprehensive community benefits package for Central Soma. $500 million out of the $2 billion anticipated will go towards transportation infrastructure. And we just urge the board to consider that as you move forward into your TSF recommendations, as well as the future Central Soma plan impact fees in context of your decision today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public, please come on up.
Matt Field with TMG Partners. Thank you again for your work. I'm a resident and a native and do really appreciate actually focusing on transit sustainability. I'd also like to acknowledge the reduction in the $5 down to the $2 in Central Soma. We appreciate that in respect to project feasibility, and would echo Sharon's comments that in the context when you take the Greater Central Soma plan, if you can consider all of these fees in context, we'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Mike Risso from Kilroy Realty Corporation. I also want to deliver the message that we're strongly in support of more transportation improvements in the region. I do agree that transportation is a vital part of our business infrastructure. Would like to respectfully ask you, when you consider Central Soma, to consider the total fee package, including the context of this transportation sustainability fee if you do adopt it. The Central Soma plan, as was mentioned, already has a very robust fee package that's been many years in the making, and as was also mentioned, is generating $500 million for transportation improvements. So we're certainly in agreement that that's important funding, and would just like you to keep that context in mind when the Central Soma plan comes in front of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. Seeing no other members of the public who wish to comment, then I'm going to close public comment for item 1. Supervisor Peskin, or actually, sorry, Supervisor Kim, I think you want to speak after public comment.
Yes, thank you, Chair Tang. First of all, I want to thank Supervisor Peskin for bringing back the transportation sustainable fee for large non-residential projects. This was a debate when when Supervisor John Avalos first introduced the reiteration of our transportation impact fees and how our large commercial developers pay into that fee. Understanding that as we create jobs, there's a burden on SFMTA, and we need to make sure that we have a transportation system that is able to absorb new workers and residents in our new city. in our growing city. I just wanted to say that then I did support a larger increase to our transportation sustainability fee for large non-residential projects, and support the fee increase outside of the Central Soma plan area. Actually, a few weeks ago, when I talked to Supervisor Peskin, I asked to hold back the Central Soma fees as we are currently looking at all the fees as a whole in the Central Soma plan in late June. However, the Planning Commission has now heard the Central Soma plan and has heard the TSF increase, and they have recommended the $2 increase for the Central Soma plan. So understanding that this has now been supported by the Planning Commission, I'm happy to support this today. We will have an overall conversation on all of the fees as the Central Soma plan moves forward to the full board through June and the beginning of July. And I'm certainly happy to continue this conversation, but I think given the strong recommendation from the Planning Commission, I am ready to support this today.
Thank you. Supervisor Safai.
So I just had a couple questions for maybe staff. You can come back up. So can you just reiterate, I know Supervisor Peskin was telling me, but how much does this generate inside of Central Soma and then outside collectively?
I believe that the $2 is about $12 million. I think, let me get...
Ms. Jones, maybe.
Oh, maybe Ms. Jones from SFMTA. Either one of you is fine.
Yeah, the $2 increase in Central Soma and the $5 elsewhere would generate, under our estimates, $11.4 million.
How much inside of Central Soma?
8.2.
8.2 and then 4 million.
About 3.
Yeah,
3 outside of Central Soma.
So, and is this attached in any way to the actual feasibility? Because I know the last time that we were here, they said the feasibility said it did not compute for Central Soma.
Yeah, the department analysis was that it did not compute. However, the Planning Commission's feeling very strongly was that it probably could.
And what were some of the reasoning behind that?
Well, they didn't hear anybody via email or via public testimony.
So there was no financial analysis. It was more based on the response from the community.
Yeah.
Okay. So and maybe this is through the chair to Supervisor Peskin, is there a component in here that talks about redoing the feasibility?
So the answer is yes, and we actually spoke to that. I spoke to that in my remarks, and planning is actually intending to do that in the coming year. Mm-hmm. But I also wanted to hark back to something I said a couple of weeks ago, which is that in our other incarnation as the San Francisco County Transportation Authority, and saying this, remembering that the sales tax tanked, and that we have the collective responsibility as part of the Transportation Task Force 2045 endeavor to find $100 million a year. And as I've been very clear and was clear at the last meeting, this $10 to $12 million would actually come out of whatever instrument we bring forward, hopefully in November, in order to do our collective part. I also wanted to say that...
I had another...
Sure, I just want to add one other thing, which is there are 6 major sites in the Central Soma. You have representatives from half of them here today who have stated what they've stated for the record. But I have to say this, which is every single one of these 6 property owners and developers or companies that are under contract to buy property are extremely sophisticated. Each and every one of them pay lobbyists and consultants to read our agendas week in and week out. This TSF is not a secret. As a matter of fact, it was introduced very publicly. There were articles written in the newspaper about it. You didn't even need a lobbyist or somebody who reads the board agendas or the legislation introduced. It was the subject of a hearing at this committee. It was a subject of a planning commission hearing. And I do want to state, because I'm mildly annoyed by it, that were it not for an unsolicited email communication from a city official who was actually defying what the Planning Commission, the oversight body, appointed 4 members by the mayor and 3 members by the president of the Board of Supervisors, acted upon last Thursday. Had that email not gone out on Friday, Mr. Grisso would not be here. Mr. Fields would not be here. But I am certain that their lobbyists and consultants knew that this legislation was pending. So this is a mildly manufactured thing, and I had to get that off of my chest because the individual who did that knows that I'm less than pleased about it.
Okay, so back to my question through the chair. It was about the feasibility, and I appreciate that, Supervisor. I'm not trying to minimize that. What I want to know is, can we put into the legislation, are you open to that we actually have a formalized process for feasibility review?
We do. I mean, the Central Soma plan is coming to us. You can see Mr. Sanchez is nodding his head. So respectfully, through the chair, we have that. We are the Board of Supervisors. We can take anything up. Simple answer is no, I would not be comfortable with inserting that.
No, what I mean is not for the Central Soma, just for the transportation sustainability fee, so that we could see how this plays out. Now, I'm fine with what you're proposing today, but what I mean is have the opportunity to look at the fee itself and what impact it has on non-residential overall, so that we can have a report back and see how the impact is.
If I can jump in for a second, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, department staff, but the controller's office is supposed to do an analysis of the impact fees every 5 years, and the next time they would do it is next year. So, this kind of feeds into my comments that were from our last committee meeting, but I'll reiterate today, which is that I would have liked for us to be considering increases to any fees, whether in Central Soma or elsewhere, after the analysis or a future analysis would have been done. That would have been my preference. And I also shared at the last committee meeting that, for about $12 million, it's a small amount for a lot of the pains we're going through at this very moment. But I also understand the responsibility that Supervisor Peskin has and feels with his role on the TA as a chair there. In any case, that. Okay, so in any case, those are my thoughts, but to answer your question, Supervisor Safai, so the Controller's Office will have an analysis on the impact fees next year. So I don't know that we need...
On the TSF.
These are just impact fees in general, right? Maybe department staff can answer that.
I was more specific, through the chair, I was more specifically referring to the idea of this new fee that's going to be added to non-residential, and then having the opportunity to come back and look at the feasibility and what impact that has on incentivizing or disincentivizing. I think it's going to be a positive report based on the passionate feelings of the Planning Commission. So
perhaps
let's have some numbers
why
to back that up.
Why don't we turn it over to Ms. Jones?
Yes, Sarah Jones, SFMTA Planning Director. So there is a review of all citywide fees every 5 years, but the Board of Supervisors, when they approved the ordinance for the transportation sustainability fee, also included an analysis on a 3-year cycle of economic feasibility.
So is that currently in this ordinance?
So that is
or
that's
part of a citywide policy?
Yes, we've incorporated into our budget supporting the planning department in conducting that feasibility study.
So if we pass this today, through the chair, if we pass this today, how much time will pass before we have an understanding of the fiscal impact and the sustainability or feasibility of this? In 3 years?
No, for this upcoming year, the study is going to be undertaken in the next few months.
So it would be a year from now that this would be studied?
Within the upcoming year.
Got it. Okay. That sounds good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so I think hearing that, I could have gone both ways, right? I would have, again, preferred that regardless if it was a controller's analysis of the citywide impact fees or the TSF analysis, the feasibility analysis that would have been coming up in this next upcoming year, I would have loved for any increase to have been associated with those studies, but I will defer to our district supervisor and where much of the impact is, as well as the planning commission that supported it. So it is what it is today. Supervisor Safai, did you still have comments?
Yeah,
or-
I did. I just
Okay.
had one more through the chair to Supervisor Peskin, because when I heard a couple of the comments, I heard them say, and I think we talked about this for a second, the idea that there's $500 million in fees that are being generated by Central Soma. There's been a lot of conversation about transportation and overall fees. We're going to be taking that up in the next 2 months. So the idea of taking this and putting it into the consideration of that and potentially having that.
Why don't we have Ms. Jones attempt to address that, who will be more articulate than I ever will be?
Sounds good to me.
Well, this is just scratching the surface of the issue, but there is a distinction between what the fees that come off of development projects pay related specifically to an area plan or to a community benefit district, and what we are able to spend our transportation sustainability fees on. The money that is levied on development projects in the context of an area plan. Some of it goes to that sort of invisible stuff that nobody really wants to think about or pay for, but most of it does go to something that is clearly tied to and supporting a development project, like a complete streets project right there, or transit or transportation infrastructure that is within the area and enhancing the area and the development projects overall. In contrast, transportation sustainability fee is a funding source that helps us put money into the transportation system in ways that improves it in sort of a more invisible, basic kind of way. So, for example, you can use transportation sustainability fee to pay for a new engine for a bus that extends the life of that bus, deals with state of good repair, that kind of thing. So it's not a directly comparable funding source that you can just swap out indiscriminately. So there is a certain value to MTA of TSF that doesn't come from these projects, which are also very important improvements as well.
No, I get that. That makes sense. Thank you for that explanation through the chair. I would just say that in the context of all the fees that are going to be considered in this larger package coming up at Central Soma, there is a point by which we cannot go past. Otherwise, some of the projects become unsustainable. And so I said, I think it's important to consider that in the larger context, since we're to the end of the road on that debate. And so we want to consider this fee as part of the larger package that's going to be coming in front of us. But yes, thank you for that distinction. One seems to be more localized to the area, and one can also have impact on the area, but impact in other areas of the city as well. I appreciate that distinction. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Supervisor Kim?
I just want to reiterate for members of the Land Use Committee that the entire Central Soma plan will be coming before this committee. We are already currently working with our key site developers and other Central Soma developers and the community on developing a cohesive plan with all of our fees. It's not to discourage what is happening today, but I feel very confident that when we make a final vote, it will be a comprehensive look at everything together. I think for now, I feel comfortable with supporting with this $2 fee, and it will be known to everyone that this that transportation is a priority within our Central Soma plan. And I think that we will work to adjust accordingly to make sure that these projects do pencil out, because we're not trying to prevent development in Central Soma. We want this to happen. And given that the Plan Commission has had an opportunity to evaluate both the Central Soma plan and TSF after they've approved the Central Soma plan, I do feel comfortable moving forward with this today. It's not that we get another bite at the apple, but again, the whole plan is coming before this Land Use Committee on June 25th.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your comments, Supervisor Kim. All right, with that, colleagues, do we want to have a motion on this item or any further debate?
I will move this forward with recommendation to the full board.
Okay, and we'll do that without objection. Okay, we'll do that without objection. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, are there any other items before us today?
There's no further business.
Thank you. We are adjourned.